the major events that we have faced as a church and how we have tackled them and how the Lord has led us through them to save souls despite the circumstances. We continue to live, as almost everyone surely is aware, in a world that is seemingly always emerging from, in, or on the edge of a new crisis. Such crises range from geopolitical tensions, wars and rumors of wars, conflicts, to financial troubles, to threats to our health from diseases or other natural disasters. And these events have, as most of us are aware, occurred fairly regularly throughout most of history. In the Bible, Jesus clearly forewarned us of these kinds of events, sharing in Matthew 24:6 that you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of birth pains. However, the good news is that Jesus concludes in verse 14 that despite all this, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now we know that while Jesus' words apply to all of Christian history after he spoke them, they were true as the years and centuries went on. We know that they also have been true within the shorter history of just the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We all are also no stranger to the types of events just described by Jesus. Indeed, we might suggest the Adventist Church is perfectly built to weather the worldly storms many of us experience. Indeed, Seventh-day Adventism was officially born in the midst of one of America's bloodiest conflicts, the American Civil War, on May 21, 1863, in a place named none other than Battle Creek, Michigan. The place is named as apt, for the currents of war and turmoil would continue to flow around the church and its activities around the world for the next century and a half unto the present time. In today's presentation, I will share a brief survey just touching on some of the high points of the major political, financial, and health challenges that the Adventist Church has encountered and how they have been overcome by the grace of the God's Spirit. It would be appropriate to start our presentation today by mentioning the American Civil War. Of course, the Civil War was a horrendous conflict that tore and pit brother against brother and tore states apart and tore communities and towns apart. But we know that when it commenced, the soon-to-be Seventh-day Adventist movement only numbered some 3,500 members with about 125 congregations. What's interesting about the timing and location of these congregations is that they were exclusively located in the northern states. It may be that the providence of God saw fit to put the original location of the church and its rise as a movement, to have it planted in the border, not in the border states or in the South, where the churches and their members may have faced a much more hazardous experience in beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist message than they did. Even risk being, as we might say, wiped out. Buildings and other such could have been destroyed at great cost. But God's hand evidently was present, locating and preserving most of the new Adventist movement in the northern territories and states that would see more or less direct conflict. At the same time that we say that God helped preserve the origin of the Seventh-day Adventist movement at a time of tremendous conflict in our nation in the United States, we could say that there was never a better time for a moment of relevancy for a movement like the Seventh-day Adventist Church to appear, as the gospel message, when first announced by Christ himself, as recorded in Luke 4:18, explicitly stated that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed. Such an announcement of the true gospel message in its entire holistic scope would be very appropriate for the context of the Civil War in the United States when the church was birthed. Although the church, in hindsight and theologically, wisely, though not without controversy, adopted a position of non-combatancy as our official stance, they also made it clear that they were strongly in sympathy with the anti-slavery cause and supported the Union, with numerous articles shared to that effect in the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald and several of our other periodicals of the time. This first trial of our relevancy as a church was a tremendous success for the church, and our growth continued steadily following the Civil War. In the rise of new kinds of racism in the South and various other class warfare conflicts, we know that the United States would remain in many respects a country torn asunder. It was not easy to heal from the wounds that the war had wrought. Although efforts were made to integrate the two halves of our nation, the North and South, after some time some of the old cultural elements resurfaced and rampant racism existed throughout the South and in some parts of the North. As this dynamic developed in the late 1890s, the Adventist Church was not inactive. Although often slow and lacking a fully energized response, as we might add that it was with many of the matters that it was facing at the time, at the urging of Ellen White and with her own son Edson involved, work among the former slaves commenced, and as the decades went on, progress was surely seen. Not only in America would this kind of activity take place, similar problems such as class warfare and other types of tensions, social tensions, existed in other nations at this time. For example, during this same period, general period, mission service took place by individuals such as Ferdinand Stahl, a German-American who traveled with his wife Anna to South America, spending a lot of his life transforming the people in the highlands of Peru and along the Amazon, educating the illiterate through schools and teaching them how to transform their society and gain liberty for themselves. Their efforts won many into the church and even helped with altering the nation's constitution to officially recognize religious liberty. These older examples vividly but briefly illustrate the pioneer spirit to engage in God's work wherever it may be found and under whatever circumstances may exist. Of course, not always did things go smoothly, but God was still leading our movement when you step back and see where we were trying to go. Now, as the 1890s moved along, as time began to move forward, it is apropos to note that at different times in the past, we as a Seventh-day Adventist Church have faced one of the greatest challenges that we have anticipated, expected, predicted, and that would be the rise of religious fervor, including in particular Sunday laws that would restrict religious liberty throughout the United States. There was a group of many